Hi, I'm Steve Shank. Welcome to what I do. I talk. I was raised in Minnesota, up with the Swedes and Norwegians. My daddy was 62 when I was born, so I was raised basically by a pioneer. He referred to himself as an animal husbander. He was what they would call now an animal whisperer, I guess, basically. He dealt with horses and dogs and cattle. I got a lot of my philosophical base from him. He called himself a curbstone philosopher. A lot of the terms that I use come from him because he was old school, very old school. He believed that everything should be appropriate, and he never went into town dressed in his farm clothes. He always dressed up a little bit. One of the principles that he always said was, it's never quite enough to do all you can. You just have to do whatever it takes to get a job done. He also said that, son, if you want to do something, if you're trying to figure out how to do something and do it the best and the fastest and the easiest, what you need to do is develop and understand what the key is to whatever you're trying to do. And that was his way of saying, you look at what you're trying to accomplish, and there's always the best way, there's always the philosophy behind it. One of the things he used to say was, if you know the philosophy of a man, you know the man. He'd always go into town dressed very well. He wore what they called a frock coat. That was the one many of you have probably seen, that has the felt around the collar, and it was a long coat. It was like a riding coat. And he always wore kid gloves. He talked about that kid is kid leather, because with the teams of horses that he drove, they were so up into their bits that if you tried to drive with just your bare hands, you'd get blisters and all that kind of stuff. So he always wore kid gloves, and he always dressed very well when he went into town, no matter what he was doing, to get a bolt for the baler or whatever he was doing. He was in town one day, and there was a railroad spur running right alongside the hardware store that he'd stopped into. About 4 guys were trying to load a big Percheron stallion. Percherons are the kind of the war horses that the French used to use. We call them draft horses now because they got converted to doing the work in the fields. But he was a big old boy, about 2,400 pounds. That's a little over a ton of horse. And 4 guys were wrangling him, trying to get him into this boxcar. The problem was, every time we went up the ramp, the boxcar has the frame around the door drops down from the height of the boxcar once you get inside. And he'd get up there, and as soon as he'd see that lip on the door that he had to get his head under, he'd back away. And of course, you got a little bit over a ton of horse, he's going to drag those 4 guys all over the place. And so my dad, as he tended to do, he stood and kind of watched, and he kind of watched, and he kind of watched. And then he decided to do something. So he walked over and talked to the wranglers, and they were sweating, and they were cussing, and they were doing everything, beating on the horse, trying to do everything they could to get that horse in the ring. And he said, "Boys, can I give it a try?" Of course, they kind of looked at him. He was kind of duded up, and they figured he probably couldn't do much. And they said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "Well, you've been working at it for quite some time, so do you mind just, let me give it a whirl here." So he walked up, and he and I have kind of the same voice qualities. He'd go up and he'd talk to a horse or an animal and get acquainted with them, and he just patted the old boy. Of course, the horse was kind of high from being all hassled, but he quieted him down, and as he talked to him, he just kind of took him by the halter and just turned him around, and so he was facing the other way from the ramp. And then as he kept on talking to him, he just said, "Now, old boy, I just want you to back up a little bit." And he pushed on his halter, says, back up. And the old horse kind of backed up a little bit and backed up a little bit more, and pretty soon he backed up the ramp and backed right into the boxcar. And then my dad gave the rope to one of the handlers and said, "I think you'll be okay now." If you step back from any situation and kind of figure out my daddy referred to as the key, and figure out what makes things work. Then you can move forward and accomplish unbelievable things.